Go, Skyline. General wants to see you.
There is only one thing harder than winning a war.
Keeping the peace.
For the past 5 years, we coexisted peacefully. Until now. If we don't find a solution, 3 billion will die. However, we crack their navigation. We're embarking on the first mission to their world. You've been blessed with the ability to interact with alien tech. And I want you to join us. Give them a taste of their own medicine.
Oh, wow. You got the whole poster in the background, too.
As when I first saw this triptych poster, I said, well, there's my permanent Zoom background, you know.
Very fitting.
Thank you.
So, I mean, first off, congrats on Skylines. And how's quarantine been?
Thank you. I can't complain. Like most people, I probably still do. But the timing really worked out for us. Like, you know, we locked the main edit like in February, and I flew back home from the UK, and it was like we were about to start visual effects, and that's when it all locked down. So we were already in the time period where we could finish the movie remotely anyway, you know. So I just kind of did all the VFX, all of the sound design, and the music, and the mix. We did the pre-mix at least all remotely, and then I did go to the UK in October for like 3 weeks just to finish the mix, because we're trying to figure out a way to do it remotely where I'd go to a stage in LA, but the time differences and the doubling the cost, because now we have to rent two mix stages. It ended up doing, we just kind of did the quarantine and doing a lot of testing, and luckily everybody was healthy and we're able to finish the movie.
So what was the germ of the idea for Skylines? Because I interviewed back in 2018, you said you had already started the script. But there are things in there, like the film starts and there's a pandemic. And there's also some like parallels to Trumpism with, you know, the intolerance of the pilots. And I was like, wait a minute, how did he write this when it's like so relevant right now? Like, how did that work?
Well, yeah, I mean, I came up with the idea in 2017. So we'd been living with Trumpism for at least 2 years at that point, right?
Yeah.
Because I was following the Republican primary with a lot of dread. I had a really bad feeling about him, but I still just didn't think it was possible. And then one by one, I saw these people that I just knew better, kind of going along with it, and it was quite a horror show. So that deeply affected me. And then so it was something there's definitely, I don't think anyone else has actually really brought that up in an interview, but yeah, there's some more overt references to it, that even on set there was a couple of lines that were about, you know, building walls or bridges and stuff like that, and I was like, by the time this movie comes out, you know, it'll be 2020. I don't think anyone wants to hear anything about building walls. So I cut that from the edit, but there was definitely some overt references to that. The pandemic was just a total accident. It was trying to figure out, you know, a cool story and a real kind of you know, something to kick it off, that why they would all need to come together and go on such a dangerous mission. So it was one of those words that, like, you know, talking about it on set, I think even the first time the actors said the word pandemic, they pronounced it incorrectly. And then now everyone knows how to say it, right? Like, oh, a pandemic? Yeah. So yeah, it definitely, the germ though, I think came from beyond Skyline itself. Was just like, we had a real international team of badasses on that movie. And so I was kind of wanted to do a men on a mission, or a team on a mission movie for the follow-up. And it was just about how to get there and where would they go. And nothing seemed to excite me as much as going to the alien planet.
So speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about world building because I'm always fascinated with that process. And in Skylines, you kind of blow open the world and you get really ambitious. Now, it's also, you can tell Skylines is influenced by a lot of things. Now, how as a writer do you handle that to be influenced by these things, but not sort of like fall into them where they become just homages? That's got to be a slippery slope for you.
It is. And it just depends on like, if you can kind of, I guess, tune into the wavelength of how, and if sometimes some people, you know, really like the tightrope that we walk, and some people are like, oh, it's too much, or it's not enough. For me, it's kind of cluing on to the fact that like, yes, I love these too. I love these movies that are inspiring me too. But here's what's different about it. You know, Aliens, it's they don't know what they're walking into. It's very much a Vietnam parallel. You know, where they're kind of really cocky. They think they're going to go in there and it's going to be a cakewalk, and they don't know what they're walking into. So for us, it was a little different because these soldiers have fought a war against aliens. They don't, not necessarily this type, but it's not the same vibe. And it's also, the whole mission's being led by aliens. So it's like we have, you know, Rose and Trent are these hybrid characters. So to me, what I really liked about it was like, I'm using, you know, the framework, and everybody knows these other movies and these little touchstones and, you know, little homages and winks here and there. But to me, what was interesting was the nuance that we had of that, you know, the team was comprised of humans and alien hybrids, and how they were going to get along, if at all. And so that's where that kind of drives the more, I'd say, unique parts of the story, is that we, you know, I would always be like trying to think about what makes us different. And Trent in his own way is like, sort of like our wrecking ball, our Optimus Prime of the group, where you kind of have to get him out of the way for there to be danger. And then he comes back in and smashes things to bits. And then trying to figure out how Rose's powers could, you know, work, but also be have a price to them, and that they weren't just like a cheat button to get out of every obstacle, and that there was something that she was struggling with from the very beginning of the movie. Because, you know, Beyond Skyline ends on such a triumphant note. It's a little bit of a subversive that we take the triumphant note and we immediately kind of drive it into the gutter, and then she has to build herself back up and kind of evolve into the next stage of who she's going to be.
But I really enjoyed that because it still felt like its own entity. Like you're watching it and you're like, okay, he borrowed from these things, but it feels very much Skyline. Like you keep true to your world, which is, it's not an easy thing to do when you're like dealing with some of the concepts you're dealing with here.
No, especially with, I think a movie, it's funny because a movie like Aliens is so fucking good that like no one else tries to do anything like it. Like as influential as the movie is, the movie's influence is more within like sequel structures and like group dynamics and music and tension, and kind of like the entire script is influential, but it's not influential in the fact that people have made a ton of space mission movies since then. I mean, it's 1986. This is 2020. That's 34 years ago. And it's funny because people will be like, oh, you're not bringing anything new to it. It's the same as, Aliens and Starship Troopers and Pitch Black. And I'm like, the newest movie that you just mentioned is 20 years old. Like kids have not seen these type of films because the other ones are almost so good that they don't really try. So to me, it was like, you know what? You know how many coming of age movies we get like every single year? How many of these other movies we get like every single year? So like you're saying, like every 20 years we can't do a space adventure movie. So to me, that was something that I just felt like, obviously they people make alien movies and they make these type of things, but I didn't feel like they'd done it kind of at that scope in a long time. So I was trying to bring it back. And what's exciting to me, which is kind of a happy accident, is that Lindsay has like a really big younger fan base, that this is probably going to be their first space adventure movie. And then, you know, hopefully they'll get into the genre and they'll get more excited by science fiction and they go back and watch the classics. So that's kind of just all a happy accident for how this whole thing came together.
that perfectly leads into my next question because you brought up Lindsay. So these are obviously effects heavy films, and about 90% of these films is trying to get the people on screen, make us believe that this is all really happening. And as a director, you're phenomenal at that because Lindsay just kills it because she totally believes everything, and we believe everything because she believes everything. And how much of that for you is casting? Like, how do you find these people? And how much of that for you is as a director? Because you have to direct these people to react to things that aren't necessarily there because we're watching the bloopers at the end and we're like, oh, that looks hilarious. If somebody else tried to do what you did, it could come out ridiculous, but it pays off. Like, I was like really sad when Trent got hurt and I was like, oh my God, what's gonna happen to this guy? But like, you know, everybody pulls it off.
Well, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you to say. I do think I'm of the it is like 90% casting. I think it is kind of like recognizing people that you respond to, you know, like when I first saw Lindsay in the 100, I had a very similar reaction to seeing her as when I first saw Frank in Warrior. Yeah. I'd seen him before that, but like in Warrior, it was like he came alive. And it was just like, oh, they're like this authentic, real personality. And how great is it to take someone who's that authentic, that feels almost like someone you know in real life, and put them in these unreal situations. They're going to make it all the more grounded and real, you know, by having that juxtaposition. But yeah, to me, like the day where we filmed, well, first of all, the first day that she filmed was her and Trent in the intro on green screen. So already I knew, like, you know, we were talking about, you know, when she wanted to look at him at what point, and she was getting very emotional. And she's like, I really need to look at my brother right now. And I was like, oh, wow. She called him her brother, you know, like, so I already felt like really, really happy about that. But it was fairly early on that we filmed the scene in the first act where they're reunited. And for me, it was like a magic trick. It's like, yes, the suits look great, and Jeremy Fitzgerald, who's our super performer, is really good, and he gives Lindsay such a nice, you know, sounding board to push against, and we block the scene out and they work together. But it's like you said, she kind of has that like old school, like Jim Henson actor, where she just like looks at him and you can feel that she loves him. And so that to me was like behind the monitor, like, yes, like there's not really anything I could do more than her talent. Like, her talent is there. But she took it seriously. But she also at the same time wasn't afraid to, you know, embrace the humor. Like the line, some of the best jokes are her ad lib, or her friend on set, Renee, is a very gifted comedian, and she would also give us. But like the "Why are they always wet" line was one of her ad libs, and I was like, yes, this is exactly the tone. You know, it's exactly like, you guys, you're getting emotional. You're about to like hug this Muppet, but now we have to like make reference to the fact that he's got these big, huge paws that are holding your hand. And so yeah, she really kind of brought everything that I needed in that role, and it, like I said, a magic trick, making Trent come to life.
Yeah, I mean, even like some of the stuntmen you cast too, they put on some rock solid performances. Like, they're acting, and you're like, why haven't I seen this guy in anything else? And it's really kind of interesting how you work with these actors that I don't think would normally get leads, like Brillo, and you kind of turn them into leads, which is not an easy task. It's not.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, two of our, you know, Daniel is obviously most well known for his martial arts, especially the Bloodsport sequels in the 90s. And then he kind of has become this like amazing utility player for 8711, where he's like in every single movie that the John Wick guys do. Even if, you know, he's in the first John Wick, but then he's in John Wick 3, like during the end, as like 5 of the guys that Keanu kills in different armor and stuff like that. But it was really fun to me to get him to play like, you know, one of the lead roles, and also have a role where he gets to kind of be, you know, have 2 sides to his personality, and show that, you know, he's a really capable performer, but you know, he's, I mean, not just a capable stunt performer, action performer, but he's a really good actor. You just have to kind of write the roles for these people and kind of you know, what's the word, shape it towards them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that always seems to work. But for the leads like Frank and Lindsay, it has to be something kind of a little bit of like a muse in your head, because you do sit down and I'm like, I'm writing this whole movie for Frank Grillo, I'm writing this whole movie for Lindsay Morgan. So that's just one of those little things that kind of like spark when you see him and you're like, I got it. And you go for it. And luckily that with the both of them, that worked out.
So you brought up the action sequences, and my editor on my blog was actually a big action guy, and you wanted to know this. So for the fight scenes, since these are pretty much fight films as much as they are sci-fi films, how do you approach these sequences? Because you not only have the suits to take into consideration, you have the CGI, and you also have the leads that have to look as badass as possible with choreography. So how do you manage to make that look the way you do, and how do you piece that all together? Like, what's your process from start to finish with doing some of these fight sequences?
Each one was a little different. You know, I'd say on Beyond, because it was my first time in the Wise team, it was their first time working with someone, you know, aside from Gareth Evans from the Raid films and from with Timo, even though they hadn't done any of the Timo action movies yet. They'd all kind of prepped Night Comes for Us, but it got pushed till later. So for them, I think they were like super respectful in that they like would just give me the choreo on like a wide shot, like a steady camera. It was just like the action. They were like not trying to say where the camera should be. And so Chris Probst, who was the DP for the second one, and me, we would kind of like take what the choreo was and then try to figure it out and use a lot of cameras. We didn't do like the one camera thing on that much. You know, Chris is a really excellent handheld operator, so that helped me kind of figure that out. And we got more collaborative with them on like suggestions of where camera would be, where inserts would be as we went. But more typically is what happened on this one with like Real Deal stunts, where the stunt guys, you know, I generally write out my fights more detailed than some scripts. I guess some people will just be like, they fight. And sometimes it gets that way. Like Owens and Z's fight was very simple in the script. You know, it was like Owens grabs him. It was a chokehold. He breaks the choke. He knocks him back. He locks him out. Obviously, well, that becomes like a 2-minute long fight in the movie. So some of them are simple and you're like, okay, let's go to town on this. Other ones like the cavern assault with the shadows had to have a lot blocked out on the script. In the script, it was probably 2 minutes longer. There was even another fight at the end of it. And then when you give any of that to choreographers, especially guys like Real Deal, they just blow it out. And they give you back, like, I think they gave us back like 8 to 10 minutes of different ideas that went into that one. And so other ones were much more kind of like almost to what the moments would be. And it would kind of be like, okay, well, what style do we want this fight to be? With the cavern, we already had the set kind of half built, but it was one of those situations where it still felt like they were too badass in some of the choreo. And so it wasn't even until like the day of that we came up with having Rose get ripped away from the group, and that kind of driving the whole action. Because originally it was like Alexei got hit, they got hit, and then they were fighting on which way to go. And then the aliens all came in on them. But I kind of came up with this thing that broke all of the choreo to have her get ripped through and make it more like, okay, now we have to go get Rose. She's the most important person of the group. And it kind of focused that action scene and allowed me to pull the actors apart, give each one their bits, and then bring everything together with Alexei. But something like, without giving any other ones away, okay, well, like Rose and when she's down there with the other alien and those two fights in the second half of the movie, when she's fighting to the aliens, that one, like, okay, guys, I feel like this is like I would talk to them and be like, this very much like a Star Wars sort of vibe here. This is like our version of a lightsaber battle we're in like a throne room. We have our emperor, we have our two people. And so Real Deal would then do choreo with their different players kind of standing in for them. They give it to us, they give it to me and my DP, we give back notes. And then on the set, we kind of have that as a frame, but then we add things and we kind of go off where we need to go. And then even in the edit, it continues to evolve on stuff like that. But it's definitely, you know, a great benefit to have action choreographers who are so experienced and can like improvise and change on the day like that. Because some people like from the visual effects world where I come from, like some people get so married to their previs and they can't think outside of it. Now for Beyond Skyline, I didn't even have any previs. So that was like a movie with 1,700 VFX shots and massive amounts of green screen. And I had no previs to tell Frank Grillo what the alien that he was fighting in the second act of that looked like. He just had to jump onto like an Everlast boxing bag and like beat the shit out of it and like hang in green screen and just trust us. And luckily that worked out. But so I had experience at least working from just straight up storyboards and breaking down camera direction, which helped. So then on this one where we had a little bit of previs, but it was nowhere near as like as much of a something that I had as a crutch or something that I was like, oh my God, I didn't get exactly as this. I'm always kind of just trying to look for the best idea and continuing to, you know, improvise on the day.
Yeah, I was actually wondering that because you are from the special effects. Like, how hard is that for you to kind of divorce yourself from like the previs and embrace the happy accidents? Because that's something that has a different kind of intuition to it, I think.
Yeah, I mean that was actually one of the things that like I don't think people realize it about Beyond Skyline because it's kind of it's something that even other filmmakers might not realize it, but I think one of the reasons why the movie feels so strange and so different is that it's not previs, is that it's like very handheld and handmade. So there's like a bunch of just weird shots and like weird angles and like weird stitches because it didn't have the like guys in a room like thinking of the perfect shot every single time. And so part of me likes that. There's like a messiness to things that I like a little bit more than the absolute perfect version. And I tried to keep that in Skylines too, whereas Real Deal, those stunt guys, like they're very German and Germans love perfection. And I'd be like, that looks too perfect. That looks like a dance. I want them to kind of miss that. I want the block to slide and not be a perfect cha-cha-cha. So it's kind of just about like your preferences. And to me, I always feel like it's like this really fine line between it being a fight and it being a dance. And when they're both really, really good fighters, it can be more of a dance because you realize, oh, they're thinking on a different level. They're like 3 steps ahead. So it's going to be like that. But when it's like, you know, Frank, who's like a brawler versus like Eco, I really like how that fight was really gritty and muddy. And there was like, you know, blocks are like slipping off and hitting people in the face. And it's not this like perfect kind of orchestrated thing, and which we did a little bit in this one as well. So it's like, it is, to me, it's like, I have that visual effects background is that because I worked with those guys for so long, they're kind of like, ultimately you can kind of fix a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to get so hung up on it. Just go. And if you can get the right performance and the right action, you can fix all that other stuff later.
That's what they say. You fix it in post.
yeah. Which I did a lot of that in Beyond. And in this one, it was like, I really tried to eliminate as much green screen as possible. So like every set in the ship or in the planet is like at least 3 walled. You know, sometimes we'd have to build the matte painting above it.
Yeah,
so
I was surprised in the bloopers at the end. We saw a lot of it was actually constructed this time around.
Yes. And so that like I could block the scene and get a lot of the shots that are just actors talking or you know, walking through places that's in camera. But when I need to get scope, I can turn do the reverse angle, and then I just have green screen. I can extend it out and make it feel much bigger.
I was thinking about this last night, and I actually interviewed Neil Hope for the first Skyline film, and I did the press like tour for the first one, for the first Skyline.
Oh,
and,
did you say? Wait, did you say Neil Hopkins?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And
yeah, he's a friend of mine.
I did. We chatted for Beyond, and now we're chatting for this one. And I have to ask you, like, on this journey, it's been like over a decade. What's like sort of the thing you've learned from like going, because now you technically have a trilogy underneath your belt at this point.
It's absurd, right?
I know. Do you get like a card, like you get like the trilogy card as a director?
Well, there's a couple of things I like to like, there. So the whole name, the titling thing was a bit of a strange journey that we went on this summer, because this third one was named Skylines, and that was what we filmed with on set, with our, like, on the back of all the directors' chairs and on the, everything. It's Skylines. Then we couldn't clear it because there's a Netflix German show called Skylines. So we had to put a 3 in the E, and then everyone's like making fun of that naturally. And then all of a sudden I find on the social stuff, it starts going back to Skylines, and I'm like, what's happening, Vertical? They're like, oh, the 3 is a big problem on the VOD portals. And so it's actually back to Skylines. I'm like, but I already put the 3 into the movie, like, forever. It already says Skylines at the end. So my at least like my canned comeback when people are making fun of the 3 in the title was like, what's the title of the third movie in your franchise? Like, hey, you can make fun of us, but we have been, it's been 10 years now. It's kind of like this strange little engine that could. Each one seems like more unlikely than the next, and I'm just really, I guess that the word is grateful, but also just kind of dumbfounded that it did end up going this way. And I feel like what I've learned is, I guess, to just sort of trust my gut, in that, like, the things that I love there's gonna be some people out there that are gonna love it too. Yeah. And I think that's hard when you're starting out. I feel like maybe the first movie was a little bit more, I mean, it was obviously more of a collaboration between everybody, but there was elements of the movie that weren't like true to what I would say I love. There was a little bit of like an entourage-y sort of like slasher movie almost vibe to the characters. Like there was a little bit more of a horror character setup. And I don't feel like that's necessarily where my frame of reference comes from. Whereas in Beyond, where where Frank is, to then where Rose, like, those characters are more kind of the archetypal movie characters that I love. And those movies, I feel like, are just from a more kind of honest place within me of like what I love and what I want to play with. And I just try to, like, bleed into the movie so that you can feel it, and that that everyone that's at least on that wavelength is having as much fun watching it as I had making it.
Well, I'll be completely honest. Like, if you told me I would be doing this 10 years from now, I wouldn't believe you, because I remember walking out of that first screening and being like, oh my God. I love it, but there are some definite problems with, and the fact that you were able to turn it around too, and you had so much to prove with Beyond to bring it to where you are, which says a lot to get to where you are today, that you pulled out a third, and it's even more ambitious, and you're like, wait a minute.
Well, it can't be less ambitious. That's definitely, each one has to be more ambitious. And it's also like, it is so hard to make original films. So to me, it's like the fact that we're miraculously able to make these sequels, and to me, it's like I kind of take it on a responsibility that each one has to be kind of its own movie. I feel like we owe that back to the community, that if we're going to be able to make these, and all these other filmmakers, myself included, are out here struggling to get anything original made, that if I'm making these sequels, I've got to make them as original as I can. I can't just retread. We're in a different apartment in a different city. which there was some pressure to make that movie for Skyline too, to just kind of be like, just remake the same movie in a different city. And obviously I think that would have been an easier and probably a more financially successful version, but I just would never give in.
So kind of kicking back to what you were talking about earlier, where are we going to fit the 4 in for the next one? And are you going to jump immediately to that, or are you going to take some time off from the franchise?
I wish I could plan my future and I was in a place where I could be like, well, I'm going to do one for me and one for them. But I'm kind of in, whatever gets made next, especially with this weird situation we're in and how long it's going to be to be able to shoot safely. I know a bunch of movies are doing it, but those are movies at such a big budget size that, like, just looking at the different stuff for COVID on a movie like Us, that's like, we're already living in these such small margins to get these things made.
Yeah,
It's it would be a real challenge. Anyone out there making movies in the under $15 million, that's a really hard place to make movies in general, let alone now that you're going to need extra days to do things safely. You're going to have to hire extra people to make the set safe. So yeah, it's daunting. So I'd just be happy to work on any movie next year, but I would love to obviously keep making these films. I feel like in a weird way we're hitting our stride. And again, if this is the end, I still feel like incredibly lucky that we're able to make 3 at all. So,
well, to get into spoiler territory a little bit, you dropped a pretty big hint somebody would be coming back for 4. So you kind of, I mean, how far do you have these? Do you have a story at least mapped out, or are you like, you'll get to it when you get to it, or you'll be inspired on the moment? Like, how are you sort of like tackling the next entry?
It's always a little bit of both. I learned the lesson from part 2. Well, okay, so the part 1 lesson was too much of a cliffhanger, way too much of a cliffhanger on that one. So part 2, the first version that we finished had no Lindsay in it at all. It was just the kind of the general movie without the wraparound. And people said, where's the cliffhanger? It's a sequel. What's part 3? And I was like, oh, okay, that's another interesting lesson. It's like, Goldilocks, too hot, too cold. Okay, I got to find somewhere beneath, which I think we did. We brought Lindsay in. We shot for that one day, and that really inspired this entire 3rd chapter, where it said I had this like Men on a Mission movie that I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to get there. Then once we did that shoot with Lindsay, I was like, okay, now I've got this really cool dynamic between, this alien princess in a way and her protective brother. It's like, that is what's unique about this. Their dynamic to me, and if I can make you fall in love with them and their dynamic and make you care about the sacrifices they make for each other, then this whole movie's worth it. So that to me was what kind of really inspired part 3. And then it just sort of organically, there were some changes that I was doing on the set for the ending, because we actually had a different ending, which I'm going to save, and I'm not going to talk about for a possible next chapter. But there was a different sort of ending, and we filmed both of them that day. And I knew that the one that we had was going to be it. It just felt less bombastic, but more emotionally true. And I felt like the movie had done everything that it needed to do up until that point, and that she had kind of Rose and Trent and Leon have all kind of reached the end of their arcs, and we needed to kind of hint at something that was deeper from the very beginning. And so that to me, it was just like, even on the day, I was like, that's it, that's the ending, we've got it. And so then, over this summer, once I'm finishing the movie, I started writing out more and more of the ideas, and talking to different actors about interest and availability. And so, yeah, it's something I'm working on. I'm working on it before the Zoom started. So we'll just see what happens. You know, without jinxing it, it always comes down to the audience, right? I mean, for Beyond, the reason why this third movie exists is because we sold so many Blu-rays and DVDs, which is like a forgotten medium at this point. But Vertical, who's our distributor, they still do that. And so, you know, you put Alien in front of a burning city and you put it in a Walmart, people were like, all right, I'm going to grab that. And so we like doubled our sales of our expectations, and they're the ones that really helped us get this third one off the ground. So kudos to them, because even that artwork of the alien on part 2, I was like, I don't like that. They're like, just trust us. People are gonna pick up the big alien in front of a burning city. So our new artwork is coming out. It's very similarly bombastic, and I just kind of like sit back. I'm like, you see the art that I put out online, that's the kind of my aesthetic, but the stuff that seems to work at Redbox and at Walmart, I'm going to leave it up to the experts.
I mean, I bought a Blu-ray just to support you. I mean, I feel like
thank you.
I feel like I owe that to make more of this stuff come out, because you gotta, I mean, in this day and age, you've got to support the things that you like or they go away.
That's
so
very
it's
true.
like when you did your pre-order, I was like, I'm pre-ordering this because I want this in my collection, A, and B, I want to support the filmmaker because I want to see more of this kind of movies, because we don't have a lot of like you're making these yourself. You don't have a committee telling you what to do. And these are very much a singular vision sort of driving them. And we don't have that a lot these days, because that's what Star Wars was before it was Star Wars. It was one guy that people made fun of, like Lucas, because they thought he was insane. I mean, and who's to say in like 10 or 15 years, these don't have an equally large cult following, because everybody that sees Beyond Skyline kind of joins the collective, because that film is just like insane and it works on so many levels. And
it is insane.
This one is definitely, it has the payoff, it has the pacing, it has the characters. And like, I was really surprised when I saw Lindsay Morgan kick so much ass. Like, I didn't expect her to get her hands dirty as much as she did. I was like, maybe this is more of the emotional chapter. I was like, no, she's getting her hands dirty with the guys. She's throwing down. So I mean, you still got your rubber monsters beating the crap out of each other. You still got like the bombasticness. You still got the ambition. It definitely, and I can't wait until we get another one.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it is interesting even up until the very end. It's like, you know, Matthew Chouse is my producing partner on this and Beyond. He's kind of the guy who's figured out how to get these movies made. But it's really the decision-making process on this film was just kind of the two of us. And even at the very end, like the last week, you know, I'm just kind of working with VFX artists, and I got to start my own company that did some VFX on this. And so even if I didn't like something someone else did, I could just send it to my own guy and he would just finish it for me. And I'm like kind of paying him out of pocket by the end of it. And it was like, it was an interesting thing when I remember right when I finished it, someone asked like, what do you want to do next? What franchise do you want to do next? And I'm like, I just don't know. Like, I have so much freedom on this. I don't know if anything would be as fun in some ways, because I could just say, you know what, that shot's wrong. I'm just going to fix it myself and I'll just send it back. And no one said anything either way, you know, and it was probably invisible to some people, but to me, it was better.
Even
what's that?
Like Lindsay Morgan or Frank Grillo, like you pick your people in this, and that goes back to your casting, which they could pick somebody who maybe is next teen star and who can't act in front of special effects. And then you end up with a lot of these like kind of more typical micro budget films that just, they fall flat, because you can see they try to go after somebody that maybe had a following, who maybe was trying to make a jump, and their people kind of produced it, and it just didn't work. So you were able to kind of cultivate that.
It is really interesting, like that. I mean, Lindsay is incredibly talented, and she's been out there, you know, she's been working for, you know, pretty much the last 10 years. But I will say, you know, if you were to just go and say, I want to make an original movie at this budget length, at this budget level, you know, starring this cast, like there's just no way, in no way it would ever get made. And you'd have so many different roadblocks. But because we kind of got this backdoor in with part two, and obviously Matthew and I really believed in Lindsay, and when we our foreign sales company is Highland Film Group, and it's run by two women, you know, Ariane and Delphine, and they both looked at her like, wow, she's got a great look. We really love her. And that was it. There was no other like conversation about it, which I thought was going to be a battle, because I've tried to get science fiction films with female leads off the ground before, and gotten really close, and gotten like some big stars and overloaded with producers, and it still just fell apart, because it'd be like, oh no, oh you didn't get the top 3 names on our list, you got something in the next 3, so that means the budget has to go down $5 million. So to me, that's what's such a luxury about these movies, is that we kind of don't have to go through those hoops quite as much. You know, obviously it's still a ton of work to get financing and to kind of get everybody on board, but that is the blessing of doing the sequel, is that you're able to kind of you know, use this branding that in this worldwide awareness to kind of launch new actors and give people opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't get, myself included. Like I never would be able to direct a movie like Beyond if I hadn't, you know, written the first one and been so involved in hydraulics at the time.
Well, I mean, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
No,
we kind of covered
absolutely
everything a little bit.
I do feel like we did. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we covered more than a lot of the different things that we talked about. I love that you kind of picked up on the politics of it. But yeah, man, it was great talking to him. I'm so happy that you love the film, and that you have a passion for this weird little franchise that we've been making.
Man.
You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
You're looking at me with stardust in your eyes. You might think I'm exactly the type you like. Sweet love, sweet love, sweet love, sweet love. You might think I'm a girl that you could love, but you don't know the things I'm capable of. Sweet love.
I've got something better than cash. I've got a story.